Welcome to The Curious Case. I'm Davis. Where are you listening from tonight? And how has your day been so far? Tell me below. And don't forget to subscribe for a new cozy mystery every evening. Now, settle in. Take a breath. Let the quiet of the village draw you in, because tonight, something gentle shifts. Something small. Something no one expected. Tonight, something quiet in the village goes strangely wrong. Miss Marple sat near her window. Her knitting rested lightly in her hands. Simple pattern. Slow rhythm. Calm afternoon. She glanced outside. The lane was quiet. A cat slept on a wall. Nothing unusual. She added another stitch, then another. Her mind wandered to grocery lists, and the vicar's upcoming sermon. Ordinary thoughts. Soft thoughts. Then she heard it. A faint tapping. Very faint. Not loud enough to alarm anyone, but enough to make her pause. She listened again. Tap, then silence. Then another tap. Steady, not random. Miss Marple set her knitting aside. She leaned slightly closer to the window. She didn't open it. She didn't move too far. Just enough to hear better. The tapping came from across the lane. From Mrs. Penworthy's cottage. Second house, green door. Always polished, always closed. But today, it wasn't. The green door sat half open, just a few inches. Enough to notice. Enough to question. Mrs. Penworthy never left it open. Never. She checked that door twice every night. She told everyone. She was proud of her habits. Miss Marple frowned. She watched the half-open door. She expected movement, or a voice, or a visitor. But she saw none. She waited. Still no one. Only the tapping. Tap. Pause. Tap again. It didn't sound like a knock, and it didn't sound like something falling. It was deliberate, soft, measured. Miss Marple noticed something else. A shadow. Thin. Slow. Moving inside the cottage. It slid across the narrow hall. Stopped. Shifted back. Someone was there. Someone who wasn't announcing themselves. Someone who didn't want attention. Miss Marple didn't panic. She didn't gasp. She simply watched. Quietly. Carefully. The shadow moved again. Closer to the door now. Then away. Like someone deciding. Thinking. Choosing. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, but she didn't resume stitching. She held it loosely. Eyes fixed on the green door. Mind alert. Mrs. Penworthy had left that morning for the market. She mentioned nothing about expected visitors. She rarely had any. She lived alone, kept to herself. So who was inside? And why the soft tapping? Why the half-open door? Why the silent movements? Miss Marple felt a small pull of unease. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. Just a quiet signal in her mind. A quiet shift. A small change in the normal pattern. Her instinct whispered something simple, something she had learned over years of observation. This wasn't right. She leaned forward again, just slightly. The tapping stopped. The shadow froze. Silence pressed across the lane. Long, cold, still. Miss Marple held her breath without meaning to. Her eyes stayed fixed on that thin strip of open doorway. Because something was happening inside that cottage. Something out of place. Something subtle. Something small. And then the feeling settled fully. Clear. Sharp. Certain. But then something didn't quite fit. Miss Marple heard a knock. Short. Not loud. Just enough to break the quiet. She set her knitting aside. She walked to the door. Slow steps. Careful steps. She opened it. A young man stood there, thin frame, uneasy eyes, breath unsteady. He tried to smile. It didn't land. His hands shook slightly. "Miss Marple?" he asked. Soft voice, barely steady. "Yes," she said. Calm, gentle, watching him closely. He nodded quickly, almost too quickly, as if rehearsed, as if pressured. I'm sorry to trouble you," he said. He held something in his hand, an envelope, Cream paper, edges worn. Miss Marple noticed the detail immediately. No name, no address. Only a single pressed flower sealed under clear paper, a primrose. Perfectly flattened. He extended it toward her, with hesitation, with fear behind his eyes. "I was told to give you this," he said. He looked over his shoulder. A fast glance. Nervous. Almost frightened. "Who told you?" Miss Marple asked. Her tone stayed light. Her eyes stayed sharp. He swallowed. Hard. Once. "I don't know," he whispered. "That's the truth. I don't know." Miss Marple studied him. He wasn't lying. Not about that part. She took the envelope. It felt light. Too light. Something thin inside. The young man didn't move. Didn't leave. Didn't relax. He kept watching the lane, as if expecting someone, as if fearing someone. "Where did you receive this?" Miss Marple asked. He pointed toward the end of the lane. "By the old signpost," he said. "Someone left it there. Someone who didn't wait." Miss Marple narrowed her eyes. "Did they speak to you?" He shook his head. "No. They stayed behind the hedge. Said your name. Said I should hurry. That's all." He rubbed his palms against his coat. Sweaty. Uneasy. Miss Marple opened the envelope carefully. No letter. Only the pressed primrose. No handwriting. No message. Just silence. A silent flower. A silent signal. Miss Marple looked up at the young man. "So you don't know the sender?" "No, ma'am." His voice lowered even more. "And I don't want to know." A strange thing for someone to say. Too quick, too defensive, too scared. "Are you in trouble?" Miss Marple asked. He froze, completely, as if the question hit something precise. His lips parted, but he didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes drifted again toward the lane, toward the shadows, toward Mrs. Penworthy's half-open door across the way. Miss Marple followed his gaze. She saw it too, the same slight movement inside that cottage, the same hidden presence. The young man stepped back. One pace. Then another. "I should go," he whispered. "I shouldn't be seen here." "But you came," Miss Marple said. "You knocked." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Because someone told me you'd understand." He turned, walked fast, almost ran, didn't look back. Miss Marple held the envelope in her hand. Light, empty, meaningful. A pressed primrose, a nervous messenger, a hidden watcher across the lane. Patterns began forming in her mind. Small ones, thin ones, but real. Her instinct stirred again. Clear, sharp. Miss Marple felt something was wrong. Miss Marple closed the door gently. She held the envelope in her hand. The primrose inside lay flat, pressed, deliberate. Not a decoration, a message. She walked back to her chair. She didn't sit. She didn't resume knitting. She simply stared at the flower. Her mind moved through memory. Old cases, old signals, old secrets. This wasn't new. Not fully. Years ago, a villager had used the same method. Mrs. Fenton. Quiet woman, soft voice, polite to everyone. But she hid things, painful things, shameful things. She once left pressed flower notes for someone. Silent warnings, silent requests, silent guilt. Miss Marple remembered the pattern. Primrose meant fear, always fear. She glanced again toward the door, toward the lane, toward the place where the young man had walked away. His steps quick, his posture tense, his eyes frightened. He said he was new to the village, but Miss Marple had noticed something he hadn't meant to show. Behind him, half hidden by the doorframe, sat a suitcase. A large one, dark brown leather, old stitching, well-traveled. She noticed the tag too, or rather, the absence of it. The tag had been ripped off. Clean tear, fresh tear. Someone didn't want his name visible. Not on that suitcase. Not today. Miss Marple's mind placed the pieces quietly. Pressed flower. Nervous stranger. Shadow across the lane. Half-open door. Ripped suitcase tag. A pattern forming. Thin. Incomplete. But there. She sat down at last, slowly, thoughtfully. Her fingers touched the envelope again. Pressed flower. The primrose. Same flower Mrs. Fenton used long ago. A sign for something hidden. A sign for something she wanted kept quiet. Mrs. Fenton had avoided the subject for years. She changed topics. She deflected questions. She smiled too quickly. She excused herself too often. People believed her politeness, but Miss Marple saw the truth beneath it. And now, the same symbol had returned. Same method. Same secrecy. Same avoidance. Same fear. Miss Marple considered the young man's claim. "I'm new here." He said it fast, as if rehearsed, as if expected, as if needed. But new villagers usually spoke differently. They introduced themselves. They mentioned work, or family, or lodging. He had done none of that. He brought the envelope. He followed instructions. He feared being seen. He fled quickly. Newcomers didn't behave like that. Not unless pushed. Not unless warned. Not unless threatened. Miss Marple looked again at the half-open green door across the lane. Still open. Still wrong. Still watched by someone inside. She held the primrose one more time. Flat. Silent. Message without words. Mrs. Fenton's past was tied to pressed flowers. She used them when she couldn't speak. When she feared exposure. When her secret was at risk. And now the flower had resurfaced. In the hands of a nervous stranger. With no name tag. With a suitcase ready to flee. Or hide. Or arrive unannounced. Miss Marple leaned back in her chair. Her eyes narrowed. Her mind sharpened. Something old was returning. Something buried. Something connected to Mrs. Fenton. Something dangerous. Enough to be silent. The primrose lay on her lap. Quiet. Still. Meaning heavy. And Miss Marple knew one thing with certainty. A truth she had learned long ago. Secrets never stay hidden forever. Not in a village. Not among familiar faces. Not when fear returns. And the past never stays buried. Miss Marple stepped out of her cottage. Calm steps. Steady pace. She crossed the lane without hesitation. Mrs. Fenton's cottage stood quiet. Curtains half drawn. Door slightly ajar. Not unusual, yet not comfortable. Miss Marple knocked once. Light tap. Polite. Measured. The door opened quickly. Too quickly. Mrs. Fenton stood there. Tense smile. Tired eyes. Miss Marple. What a surprise. Her voice carried a tremor. Almost hidden. Almost controlled. "I hope it's not a bad moment," Miss Marple said. Calm tone. Warm expression. "No, not at all. Please, do come in." Mrs. Fenton stepped aside. Her hand hovered at the doorframe. A small wince. Miss Marple noticed it. Inside, the cottage was neat. Neat in the way frightened people keep things neat. Nothing out of place. Nothing showing disorder. Too perfect. Mrs. Fenton moved to the kitchen. "I'll make tea. I insist." Her steps were quick. Too quick. Miss Marple followed slowly. She watched everything. Cupboard open. Kettle lifted. Hands shaking. Mrs. Fenton set 2 cups on the table. She tried to pour. Her hand trembled again. The tea splashed. Only a little, but enough. Miss Marple pretended not to notice, but she noticed everything. "Are you feeling quite well, dear?" she asked. Mrs. Fenton forced a smile. "Oh, yes. Just tired. Busy day. You know how it is." Her voice quivered. Miss Marple's eyes drifted to her arm. A fresh scratch ran across the skin. Thin. Red. Recent. Very recent. "Gardening injury?" Miss Marple asked softly. "Mrs.?" Fenton pulled her sleeve down. Quick. Defensive. Too fast to be casual. "Yes, thorns. You know how they are. Sharp little things." Miss Marple nodded. But she knew thorn scratches. This one was cleaner. Straighter. Not from a rosebush. She sipped her tea. Quiet. Thinking. Her eyes moved again. This time toward the back door. Just behind Mrs. Fenton's chair. On the floor. Near the mat. A muddy boot print. Single. Heavy. Distinct. Mrs. Fenton lived alone. She owned slippers. Soft shoes. Not boots. Miss Marple glanced at it once, then away. But she had seen enough. The soil was dark, wet, fresh. Someone else had been here. Recently. Too recently. And Mrs. Fenton didn't mention it. Not one word. Miss Marple set her cup down. Slow. Quiet. "Mrs. Fenton," she said gently. "You seem unsettled." Mrs. Fenton froze. Her grip tightened around her cup. Her knuckles whitened. "I'm fine," she said. Too fast. Too defensive. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. Not aggressive. Not demanding. Just present. Just aware. "You're trembling," she said softly. Mrs. Fenton blinked. Twice. Breath unsteady. She looked toward the back door, only for a second, but that was enough. Fear. Clear. Raw. Visible. Miss Marple recognized it instantly. She had seen fear before. Real fear. Hidden fear. But this one was different. This fear wasn't about guilt. It wasn't about protecting a secret. It wasn't about shame. It was about danger. Immediate danger. Someone close. Someone recent. The muddy boot print. The trembling hands. The scratch. The half-open door earlier. The silent shadow across the lane. Pieces aligned quietly. Sharply. With purpose. Mrs. Fenton wasn't lying to deceive. She was lying to survive. Miss Marple's breath slowed. Her mind sharpened. She looked directly at Mrs. Fenton, and the truth settled in her chest. Cold, clear, undeniable. She had seen fear before, but not like this. Miss Marple walked back toward her cottage. Calm steps, eyes steady, mind alert. The lane was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hides movement. The kind that waits. She reached her gate. Nothing unusual. No visitor. No sound. No shadow moving. But something was wrong. She felt it before she saw it. A small folded paper sat on her doormat. Square. Neat. Placed carefully. Not blown by wind. Not dropped by chance. Miss Marple stopped. She didn't touch it immediately. She looked first. Always look first. The fold was clean. Edges sharp. Paper newer than expected. Someone had prepared it. Someone had time. Someone had purpose. She bent down slowly. Picked it up. Lightweight. Too light for anything long. Just a note. Just a message. She opened it. Simple fold. Quiet handwriting. Thin strokes. Controlled pressure. Someone who planned their words. Someone who meant every letter. 4 words stared back at her. Stop asking about him. Nothing else. No name. No signature. No clue. But the smell was there. Faint. Sharp. Distinct. Cologne. Not cheap cologne. Not village cologne. This one was different. A heavier note. A cleaner finish. Imported, most likely. Someone who cared about image. Someone who hid behind presentation. Miss Marple held the paper close. Not for drama. For logic. For scent. It matched nothing she owned. Nothing Mrs. Fenton used. Nothing the young man had on him. New smell. New presence. New threat. She folded the note again. Tightly. Precisely. Just as the writer had. Her eyes drifted across the lane. Toward Mrs. Penworthy's cottage. Door still half open. Shadow no longer visible. Someone had watched her earlier. Someone had seen the young man. Someone had followed her to Mrs. Fenton's home. Someone had crossed the lane while she was away. Someone had bent down, placed the note, stood up, walked away unseen. That kind of movement required timing, and confidence, and knowledge of her habits. Miss Marple stepped inside her cottage, closed the door. Quiet click. She stood in the hall, still, thinking. The message was clear, direct, targeted. Someone believed she was asking questions, but she hadn't asked any yet. Not out loud, not verbally, not openly. They feared her intuition more than her inquiries. That said enough. Someone connected to him, someone afraid of exposure. Someone ready to threaten an old woman. Someone who assumed she would stop. She looked again at the note. Plain words, plain warning, plain trouble. But the handwriting betrayed more. Slight right tilt, confident arcs, letters spaced evenly, a person who rarely rushed. Someone careful, someone organized, someone dangerous in quiet ways. Miss Marple placed the note on the table, far from her knitting, far from her tea. It didn't belong with comfort. It belonged with danger. She sat down, straight posture, hands still, mind racing quietly. The young man's suitcase, the ripped tag, Mrs. Fenton's trembling hands, the fresh scratch, the muddy boot print, the shadow inside the half-open door, and now this note. Pieces weren't random. Pieces weren't scattered. They formed direction. A path. Straight. Sharp. Threatening. Someone thought this warning would stop her. Someone underestimated her. Miss Marple's eyes lifted. Clear. Unshaken. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't overreaction. This wasn't an accident. This was no accident. Miss Marple placed the note on her table. She flattened it with one hand. Then she examined it properly, carefully, quietly. Without rushing a single detail, the ink caught her eye first. Dark, heavy, pressed deeper into the paper than normal writing. Someone applied force. Someone used intention. This wasn't casual handwriting. It wasn't a quick message. The strokes curved smoothly. No hesitation, no shakiness. A controlled hand. Confident. Experienced. She looked again at the spacing. Even. Measured. Precise. The writer planned every letter. Planned every word. Planned the effect. Miss Marple nodded softly. A person who writes like this doesn't panic easily. A person who writes like this feels safe. Or powerful. Then she smelled the paper again. The cologne lingered lightly. Sharp note. Clean finish. Not common. Not village-made. Not what local men wore. Someone from outside. Someone wealthier. Someone who invested in small impressions. Someone careful about scent. She folded the note slowly. Set it aside. Then walked outside. She closed her gate gently. Then bent low, examining the ground. There it was. A footprint. Clear. Fresh. Mud still soft. She traced its shape with her eyes. Long length. Narrow heel. Patterned sole. Not a work boot. Not a gardener's boot. Not a villager's shoe at all. This was expensive. Quality leather. Thin sole. Imported design. She had seen shoes like this once before. Years ago. A man in a different case. A man with secrets and money. Miss Marple stood slowly. She followed the direction of the print. It went toward the lane, then turned away, toward the main road, toward the path new visitors used, toward strangers. She walked back inside. Her eyes moved again to the envelope the young man carried earlier, then to her memory. Something about the stitching on his suitcase. Old stitching. Cross pattern. Hand done. She had seen that before, too. She sat down, hands folded, mind scanning old cases. Then she found it. A case from years ago. A woman fleeing an abusive man. She used the same stitching. Same thread. Same pattern. Done quickly. Done when the original handle tore. Miss Marple remembered the man connected to that case. Wealthy. Cold. Calculated. Never punished. Always protected. He vanished a year later. Rumored to be living under another name. And now a young man appeared, with a suitcase stitched the same way. Carrying a pressed flower. Following. Instructions from someone hidden. Without a name tag. Without explanation. Without confidence. Miss Marple pressed her fingertips together, thinking, calculating, connecting. Someone from that old case was resurfacing. Someone tied to shame. Someone tied to fear. Someone tied to Mrs. Fenton. Someone tied to the primrose message. She looked once more at the note. 4 words. Heavy ink. Threat masked in politeness. And the smell of expensive cologne. The pieces were connecting. thin threads forming one path, each clue pushing her forward, each detail sharpening the picture. Miss Marple leaned back, her eyes narrowed, her mind locked in. The truth was forming, quietly, calmly, inevitably. The truth was inching closer. Miss Marple walked toward her kitchen. Slow steps, light steps. Her mind replayed every detail from the lane. She reached the back door. She stopped, looked once, looked again. The latch hung crooked, not fully open, not fully closed, shifted. Wrong. Miss Marple touched it gently. It wobbled, loose, looser than she ever left it. She checked it every morning, every evening. Her habits were exact. This was not her doing. Someone had been here. Someone had opened this door. Someone had closed it just enough to pretend nothing was wrong. She pushed the door open. Quiet creak, soft resistance. She stepped inside. Her eyes scanned the floor. That's when she saw it. A floorboard near the table, shifted, barely raised. Just enough to show pressure, recent pressure. Someone had walked there, stood there, moved there. She knelt slightly, touched the edge. Warm, not from sunlight, from footsteps, from presence. Someone entered her home while she was away. Not a burglar, not a prank, not random. Someone was searching. For what? For her? For answers? For something she hadn't found yet. Miss Marple stood slowly, her breathing steady, her mind sharp. Fear didn't guide her. Observation did. She turned toward her table and stopped again. A single pressed flower lay there, exactly centered, perfectly flat. A primrose, the same flower from the envelope, the same symbol from Mrs. Fenton's past. The same silent message. This time, no envelope, no note, no explanation, just the flower, placed openly, deliberately. Someone had entered her home, walked to her table, placed the flower, left silently. No rummaging, no mess, no broken items, just the message, just the warning, just the presence. Miss Marple moved closer. She examined the petals, dry, thin, pressed long ago. Someone kept these, someone used these, someone followed the same pattern Mrs. Fenton once used, but the style was different, more confident, more controlled, more threatening. This wasn't a plea. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a signal, a boundary. She lifted the primrose carefully. Underneath, she checked the table surface. Clean, no dust disturbed except the small circle where the flower rested. Someone placed it precisely, as if marking the home, as if marking her. Miss Marple looked around the room. Her eyes moved to the window. Curtains untouched, objects in place, chairs aligned. The intruder didn't search. He didn't panic. He didn't fear getting caught. He didn't hide his visit. He wanted her to know he had been there. He wanted her to see this flower. He wanted her to understand. Miss Marple held the primrose in her fingers. She felt the warning, not just in the flower, in the silence, in the clean placement, in the precision. Someone was close, too close. Someone watching, someone waiting, someone who didn't want her asking questions. Her eyes narrowed. Her hand tightened slightly around the thin stem. This wasn't random. This wasn't mischief. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intention, purpose, a quiet threat, a single primrose, a loose latch, a shifted floorboard, a silent intruder. The message was simple. The message was clear. Someone wanted her silent. Miss Marple had barely set the pressed flower down when she heard it. A rapid knock, too fast, too tight, not polite, not casual. She walked to the door. No hesitation. She opened it. The young man stood there again, breathing hard, chest rising sharply, eyes darting toward the lane, fear written in every movement. "May I come in?" he whispered. Not a request, a plea. Miss Marple stepped aside. He slipped inside quickly, closed the door himself, pressed his back against it. Listening. Miss Marple watched him. Calm, silent, measured. Someone followed me, he said. Voice low, shaking. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Who? Miss Marple asked. I don't know. He shook his head, breath still uneven. They didn't speak. They just kept pace behind me. Every street, every turn. Miss Marple folded her hands. And why come here? Because... He hesitated, looked down, looked away, struggled to continue. Because someone warned me not to. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Yet you still came. He nodded tightly. I didn't know where else to go. He stepped away from the door. More steady now, more desperate. You asked about Mrs. Fenton earlier, he said. She knows something. She knew my mother. Miss Marple paused, soft, calculating. Your mother? He nodded. My mother lived here years ago, before she left, before she disappeared. Miss Marple felt the pieces shift in her mind, quietly, precisely. And you think Mrs. Fenton hid something? She asked. I know she did, he said. She looked right at me this morning. She recognized me. She tried to hide it, but she did. He swallowed hard, hands trembling again. I was told she kept a secret about my family. Miss Marple said nothing, just waited. He continued. She knew my mother. She knew what happened here. She knew why we left. She knows why I came back. Miss Marple wanted details, but she stayed patient. Let him speak. The young man reached into his coat, not for a weapon, for something else. He pulled out the empty envelope, the one with the primrose, the one he had handed her earlier. I didn't send this, he said. Firm, clear. I didn't know what was inside. I didn't even know it was meant for you. Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. You said someone told you to deliver it. Yes, he replied, and I thought they meant a normal letter, but I never opened it. I never saw the flower until you showed me. Miss Marple's thoughts tightened, sharply. If he didn't send the flower, if he didn't choose the message, if he didn't know about it, then someone else did. Someone using him. Someone close to Mrs. Fenton. Someone who moved freely in the village. Someone who entered Miss Marple's home. Someone sending warnings. Someone placing flowers. Miss Marple stepped closer, a controlled step. Why are you really here? She asked. He lowered his head. His voice dropped to almost nothing. Because the person following me is the same person who followed my mother. Silence settled in the cottage. Heavy, cold, certain. Miss Marple didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was building, layer by layer, piece by piece, but one thing was clear, very clear. The truth was not complete. Miss Marple motioned the young man to sit. He didn't. He paced instead. Short steps, uneven breaths, fear still hanging on him. Miss Marple let him pace. She walked to the corner where his suitcase rested. He hadn't noticed her looking earlier, but she had. She always did. May I? She asked. Her hand hovered above the leather handle. He stopped pacing, looked at the suitcase, then at her. A long pause. Yes, he said quietly. I don't know what. You'll find. Miss Marple already had a suspicion. The stitching, the torn tag, the weight of the case. Nothing about it felt ordinary. She pulled it closer. It scraped slightly across the floor. Heavier than it looked, too heavy for clothes alone. She opened the top flap. Clothes folded neatly. Shirt, coat. Nothing strange. Miss Marple removed each layer. Slow, careful. Watching his reaction, he watched her hands instead. Not the suitcase. That told her something. She found nothing in the main compartment, but she hadn't expected to. Then she noticed it. A seam inside the lining, slightly raised, not part of the original design, hand-stitched, hidden on purpose. A secret pocket, she murmured, mostly to herself. The young man stiffened. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched. Miss Marple slipped 2 fingers into the seam. The thread gave way. Someone had opened it before. Someone had closed it too quickly. Inside, she felt paper. She pulled it out gently. A photograph. Old. Edges worn. Corner torn. She unfolded it. A simple image. A woman holding a baby. A younger Mrs. Fenton. No doubt. Same eyes. Same careful posture. The baby in her arms looked only months old. Blanket wrapped. Eyes wide. But someone else had been in the picture too. A man. Standing beside Mrs. Fenton. Or once standing beside her. Because his face was scratched out. Violently. Repeatedly. Deep lines carved through the paper. Carved until the features vanished. Miss Marple traced the ruined spot with her fingertip. The scratches were sharp, jagged, made with anger, or fear, or both. She looked at the young man. His face had gone pale. "I've never seen that," he whispered. "Not a lie. Too frightened to lie." "You didn't know about the pocket?" Miss Marple asked. He shook his head slowly. "I only took the suitcase because it was my mother's. I didn't know anything was hidden inside." Miss Marple looked back at the photograph. Mrs. Fenton holding a child. A man standing beside her. A man now erased. Deliberately erased. Not for privacy. Not for forgetfulness. For concealment. Someone wanted this man gone. From the picture. From memory. From village history. Miss Marple flipped the photograph over. A faint date written in pencil. Nothing else. No names. No notes. She studied the scratches again. They were recent. The paper fibers were still rough, not aged. Someone reopened this photograph. Someone scratched it again. Someone made sure the face stayed hidden. Even after all these years. Miss Marple's mind sharpened. A hidden father. A secret child. A fearful mother. A stranger returning to the village. Pressed flowers resurfacing. Warnings delivered. Someone didn't want the past recognized. Someone didn't want the young man asking questions. Someone didn't want this photograph seen. She held the picture up to the light. The scratches caught. The glow. Harsh, deliberate, angry. Miss Marple looked at the young man again, her voice steady, low. This man, whoever he was meant to disappear. The young man swallowed. Hard. "What does that mean?" Miss Marple folded the photograph. Carefully. Deliberately. "It means someone didn't want this face remembered." Her eyes narrowed. A cold, quiet certainty settling in. Someone wanted that face forgotten. Miss Marple left the young man in her cottage. She walked back across the lane. Calm pace. Measured breath. Mind focused. Mrs. Fenton's door was closed now. Fully closed. Not half open, not ajar. Fast change. Too fast. Miss Marple knocked. Once. Then waited. Footsteps approached. Slow. Uneven. Reluctant. The door opened. Mrs. Fenton stood there. Face stiff. Eyes guarded. "Miss Marple," again. Polite tone. Forced smile. Pressure beneath it. "I have a few questions," Miss Marple said. Calm. Gentle. Direct. Mrs. Fenton hesitated. Only a moment. But enough. "Of course. Do come in." Her voice carried tension now. More than before. Miss Marple stepped inside. The cottage looked unchanged. But the air felt different. Heavier. Charged. Mrs. Fenton gestured to the sitting room. "Please sit." Miss Marple didn't sit. She stood near the table instead, hands folded. "I spoke with a young man today," she began. "Do you know him?" Mrs. Fenton's face went blank. Too blank. "Certainly not. I've never seen any young man." Miss Marple watched her carefully. Not her words. Her hands. They gripped the edge of the table. Tight. White-knuckled. "You're sure?" Miss Marple asked. "Absolutely sure," Mrs. Fenton said. Too quick. Too calm. Rehearsed. Miss Marple stepped closer to a small cabinet. She didn't touch it. She simply stood near it. Her nose caught it instantly. The cologne. The same scent as the threat note. Same sharp note. Same clean finish. Unmistakable. Mrs. Fenton stiffened. She saw Miss Marple notice it. She looked away. Too late. "That's new," Miss Marple said gently. "You've never worn cologne before." Mrs. Fenton's breathing faltered. Her eyes shifted to the window. Avoidance. Classic. "Oh, just a new room spray," she muttered. Not believable. Not close. Miss Marple moved her gaze toward the armchair. A coat lay across it. Not hers. Men's coat. Thick fabric. Expensive stitching. Not a village coat. Not a casual visitor's coat. A man with means. Confidence. Presence. Miss Marple asked the obvious question. Calmly. Softly. "And whose coat is that?" Mrs. Fenton flinched. "Barely. But enough." "Oh, that belongs to my cousin." He stopped by. Miss Marple looked at her steadily. "You don't have a cousin." A long silence fell between them. Hard silence. Heavy silence. Mrs. Fenton's lips tightened. Her hands trembled again. Sweat formed near her hairline. She had rehearsed lies. But not these. Not this situation. Not this pressure. Miss Marple walked closer to the coat. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She smelled the same cologne, the exact same scent as the note, concentrated on the fabric. Strong, fresh, recent. She glanced back at Mrs. Fenton. The woman's eyes filled with fear. Not defiance, not guilt. Fear. "You said you didn't know the young man," Miss Marple said. "But someone else does." Mrs. Fenton swallowed. Her voice cracked. "I shouldn't say anything." Miss Marple stepped closer. One slow step. "You're not alone in this house," she said quietly. "You've not been alone for some time." Mrs. Fenton's shoulders slumped. Her breath broke. Her eyes flicked toward the staircase. Just for a second, but Miss Marple saw it. A signal. Unintentional. Clear. "Who is upstairs?" Miss Marple asked. "Mrs." Fenton closed her eyes. Trembling. Silent. Fear radiated from her. Fear of someone close. Fear of someone present. Fear of someone powerful. Miss Marple understood the truth instantly. The cologne. The coat. The fresh scratch. The trembling. The lies. The hesitation. The threat note. Someone else was here. Someone hiding. Someone watching. Her voice lowered. Firm. Certain. Someone else was here. Night settled over the village. Quiet. Still. Shadows longer than usual. Miss Marple closed her curtains halfway. Not fully. Never fully. She liked to see the lane. Even at night. She moved through her cottage. Light steps. Routine actions. But her mind stayed sharp. Mrs. Fenton's fear lingered. The man's coat. The cologne. The lies. The scratches on the photograph. Everything pointed to someone close. Someone hidden. Someone who moved quietly. She checked her back door again. Latch fixed. Floorboard steady. No new signs. No new disturbances. She prepared tea. Slow. Controlled. Not for comfort. For thinking. As the kettle warmed, something made her pause. A feeling. Small. Sharp. Instinctive. She turned toward the window. Looked through the narrow gap in the curtain, and saw him. A figure. Outside her gate. Still. Unmoving. Standing perfectly straight. Not shifting weight. Not pacing. Not nervous. Just watching. Watching her cottage. Watching her window. Miss Marple remained silent. No gasp. No sudden movement. Just observation. Clear. Steady. The figure's outline was sharp. Tall. Shoulders squared. Hands at his sides. Head tilted slightly toward her window. She could not see his face. The lamp behind her cast too much light. He stood in darkness. Miss Marple stepped away from the lamp, slowly, reducing her silhouette, taking control of the view, taking control of the moment. The figure did not move, not even a step. Miss Marple walked to the door. She didn't open it fully, just enough to see clearly from a safer angle. She stepped onto her porch. 2 steps forward, calm, purposeful. The figure remained at the gate, still watching her, silent, present. "Good evening," Miss Marple said, her voice steady, not loud, not weak, neutral. The figure didn't answer, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge the greeting. Miss Marple took one more step forward. Slow, controlled. The figure responded, but not with words, not with motion toward her. Instead, he stepped back. One step, then another, retreating into the deeper shadows near the hedge. Not running, not fleeing, just removing himself from visibility, choosing darkness, choosing distance, choosing secrecy. Miss Marple stopped walking. She didn't chase. She didn't call out again. She simply watched. The figure held his position in the shadows, silent, hidden, waiting for her to retreat, waiting for her to close the door, waiting to see whether she felt fear. Miss Marple didn't move for several seconds. Neither did he. Finally, the Prosson's figure stepped back again, then one more step, then merged completely into darkness. Gone, but not gone far. Miss Marple heard no footsteps, no rustling, no gate creak. He left like someone who knew the path well, someone who avoided sound by habit, someone trained in silence. She closed her door gently, not shaken, not startled, just aware. She locked the latch, turned the key, then stood in the hall, thinking, connecting. A man with expensive cologne, a coat in Mrs. Fenton's room, someone following the young man, someone entering her cottage, someone placing a flower, someone now watching her from the gate. The pattern was no longer vague, no longer scattered, no longer uncertain. Someone had stepped out of the shadows, not to speak, not to act, not to harm yet, just to be seen, just to warn, just to send a message. Miss Marple exhaled slowly, controlled, focused. He didn't want to be seen. Miss Marple left her cottage early. No hesitation. No delay. She walked straight toward the vicarage. The vicar greeted her at the door. Gentle smile. Mild surprise. Miss Marple, out so early? I need to check an old record, she said. Calm. Direct. The vicar nodded. He led her inside, down the narrow hall, toward the archives. The room was small. Dusty shelves, old parish books stacked neatly, decades of names, decades of secrets. Miss Marple stood before the shelves. Her eyes scanned the spines. Birth registers, marriage logs, baptism lists. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. She knew what she needed. The ledger covering the years before the young man was born. The years Mrs. Fenton whispered about. The years the village never discussed. Her hand landed on the right book. Thick, heavy, leather cover cracked with age. She carried it to the small desk, opened it carefully, page by page. No rush, no skipped lines. Every name mattered. She reached the year she needed. Her finger traced down the blag. List. Ordinary births, ordinary names, ordinary families. Then she saw it. A short entry, shorter than the rest. Sparse details, almost empty. Child, male. Date, recorded. Weight, listed. Father, just a dash. No name, no explanation. Mother, Evelyn Fenton, Mrs. Fenton. Younger then, alone then, quiet, even then. Miss Marple leaned closer. The handwriting was different from the others, more rushed, less formal. Someone had tried to finish the record quickly. She turned the page slightly and stopped. A pressed primrose was pinned beside the entry. Old, dry, fragile, but unmistakable. The same flower, the same symbol, the same message. A silent mark for a silent birth. A mark Mrs. Fenton used in her notes. A mark someone else revived for threats. Miss Marple touched the edge of the primrose carefully. It crumbled slightly. Years of pressure, years of secrets, years of hiding. The vicar stepped closer. Found something important? Miss Marple closed the ledger halfway. Enough to shield the primrose. Enough to think. Just confirming a suspicion, she said softly, her tone calm, controlled, focused. The vicar nodded and left her alone. Miss Marple reopened the ledger, studied the entry again. No father listed. No witness signature. No midwife's note. An intentional omission. A protected omission. A dangerous omission. Someone erased that father from history. Someone erased his face from the photograph. Someone tried to erase him from memory. And now the child had returned. Not knowing the truth. Not knowing the danger. Not knowing who followed him. Miss Marple closed the book gently. Her mind worked quickly now. No gaps. No missing logic. Everything pointed in one direction. Mrs. Fenton hadn't been hiding herself. She had been hiding someone else. Someone powerful. Someone controlling. Someone who still moved in the village shadows. Miss Marple exhaled slowly. The ledger. The primrose. The missing father. All pieces shifted into place. She stood, picked up the book, pinned the primrose back exactly where it had been, preserving the clue, preserving the truth. Then she left the archives, step steady, purpose sharpening. The case was no longer scattered, no longer vague, no longer uncertain. A missing father, a hidden past, a threatened son, a frightened mother, a silent visitor. Finally, the picture began to form. Clear, sharp, real. Miss Marple whispered to herself. Certain, cold, resolute. At last, a missing piece. Miss Marple returned home with a plan. No delay, no hesitation. The time for gentle observation had passed. It was time for answers. She sent a message to Mrs. Fenton, another to the young man. Short notes, direct, clear instructions. Come to my cottage, both of you. They arrived within minutes. Not together, not calmly. Mrs. Fenton looked pale. The young man looked tense. Miss Marple closed the door behind. To them. She stood between them, firm, quiet, controlled. We need truth, she said. Simple words, heavy meaning. Mrs. Fenton's hands trembled again. She tried to speak. Her mouth opened. No sound came. The young man watched her, brows tight, confused, afraid. Miss Marple placed the old photograph on the table, face side up, scratched, damaged, ruined deliberately. Mrs. Fenton saw it. Her legs weakened. She grabbed a chair, sat down, breath shaking. The young man stared. What is that? Mrs. Fenton covered her face with her hands. A quiet sob escaped, small, raw. Miss Marple spoke gently. This photograph was in your suitcase. He blinked. I've never seen it. I swear. Miss Marple nodded. I believe you, but your mother has. Mrs. Fenton lowered her hands, tears on her cheeks, years of silence cracking. I didn't want you to know, she whispered, voice thin, weak, broken. The young man stepped forward, slow, careful. Know what? He asked. Half question, half demand. Mrs. Fenton looked at him, truly looked, and something inside her collapsed. You're my son, she said, soft, desperate. True. The young man froze, breath caught, hands limp. That's not possible, he said, but the words sounded hollow, shaken, uncertain. Mrs. Fenton shook her head. It is. I gave birth to you here, in this village, years ago. She pointed at the ledger Miss Marple carried. The vicar recorded it. No father's name. The young man's face twisted. Anger, shock, confusion. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Mrs. Fenton clutched her arms tightly. I was young, alone, ashamed. The village talked. They judged. I ran. I hid you. I thought it was safer. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But I never forgot you. Not one day. Miss Marple watched quietly, letting the truth settle, letting the wound open. The young man wiped his face. Not crying, just overwhelmed. And the threats? He asked suddenly. Did you send those? The flowers? The notes? Mrs. Fenton gasped. No, never. I didn't threaten Miss Marple. I didn't follow you. I didn't enter her house. Miss Marple believed her. The fear was real, not faked, not defensive. The young man looked unsure, not convinced. Not yet. Mrs. Fenton pointed to the scratched photograph. I didn't do that either. I kept that picture hidden. I couldn't bear to destroy it. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice calm, controlled. If you didn't send the threat note, and you didn't place the pressed flowers, and you didn't scratch out the father's face. She let the silence stretch. Just long enough, just sharp enough. The young man spoke first, voice tight, low. Then who did? Miss Marple's answer was simple, cold, precise. There is someone else, someone who knows both of you, someone who knows the past, someone who wants it buried. Mrs. Fenton shivered. She understood. She didn't say the name. She didn't need to. Miss Marple had seen the coat, the cologne, the scratch on the arm, the shadow at the gate, the silent visitor, someone powerful, someone angry, someone watching, and he was getting closer. Then who did? Miss Marple didn't move from her place. She stood between Mrs. Fenton and the young man, calm, steady, prepared. The cottage felt tense. Thick silence. No one spoke. No one breathed fully. Then the front door latch clicked. Slow, controlled, confident. Miss Marple didn't turn immediately. She already knew who it was. His presence had lingered for days. In the cologne, in the mud print, in the shadow at her gate, in the coat on Mrs. Fenton's chair. The door opened. A man stepped inside. Tall, straight-backed, composed. Mr. Hale, local businessman, polished reputation, clean shoes, expensive coat. He closed the door behind him. No, hurry. No guilt on his face. Only calculation. Mrs. Fenton gasped. The young man stepped back. Mr. Hale glanced at them once, then fixed his gaze on Miss Marple. So, he said softly, you've involved her. Miss Marple didn't respond. She simply waited. He took 2 steps forward. Smooth, controlled, each movement practiced. You should have stayed away, he told the young man. Cold tone. Flat stare. The young man clenched his jaw. Why did you follow me? Mr. Hale didn't answer him. He looked at Mrs. Fenton instead. You shouldn't have let him return. You promised the past would remain buried. Mrs. Fenton shook her head weakly. I never promised anything. You were the one who wanted it hidden. Mr. Hale stepped closer, his shadow stretched across the floor. You owe me, he said quietly. I paid for everything. Your silence, your escape, your child's care. The young man's eyes widened. You paid? Mr. Hale glanced at him. Cold, uninterested. Yes, your existence was inconvenient. Mrs. Fenton broke again, tears running, hands shaking. He wasn't inconvenient, he was terrified of being exposed. That's why he hid you. Mr. Hale's voice tightened. That was then, this is now. And now he threatens everything I've built. Miss Marple finally spoke. Low, firm. Threats don't erase truth, Mr. Hale. He turned to her. Truth doesn't matter. Control does. Miss Marple stepped forward. 1 step. Calm. It was you at my gate, she said. Watching. His eyes narrowed. And if it was? It was your cologne, she continued. On the note. On the coat in Mrs. Fenton's home. On the flower you left on my table. Mr. Hale's jaw tightened. A crack in his calm. Miss Marple held up the note. The handwriting is yours. Heavy pressure. Even spacing. You write contracts with the same precision. He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. Miss Marple pointed toward the door. The footprint outside my gate came from your Italian shoes. Unique sole pattern. Imported. Only 1 pair in the village. Mrs. Fenton looked away. The young man stared at Hale in shock. Miss Marple continued. And you scratched the photograph. Because you were the man beside her. Because you were the father. The room fell silent. Cold. Heavy. Mr. Hale exhaled slowly. Long, controlled, resigned. You weren't supposed to find that, he said. It was meant to stay buried. Miss Marple stepped closer, unshaken. Secrets buried in fear always return. Mr. Hale looked at the young man, ice in his eyes. "You should have stayed away. You should never have opened the past." The young man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Miss Marple ended the silence. "It's over, Mr. Hale." He stared at her, then at the door, then at the window, his plan collapsing in front of him. His face hardened, cold, cornered. The truth had finally trapped him. And in that moment, with the clues aligned, with the lies exposed, with the past uncovered, everything clicked. And then it all clicked. Inspector Hale arrived fast. Too fast for coincidence. Someone had called him earlier. Someone watching events move. He stepped into the cottage. Calm, firm, professional. He saw Mr. Hale standing there. Rigid, cornered, exposed. "Edwin Hale," the inspector said. Voice steady. Authority clear. "We need to talk." "Mr." Hale didn't answer. He didn't move. He simply stared at the floor. Miss Marple stepped aside. "Let the inspector pass. Let truth take its place." The young man stood behind her, shoulders tight, breathing shallow. Mrs. Fenton wiped her eyes, silent, waiting. Inspector Hale folded his arms. "I've had several reports," he said. "Strange activity in the lane, unusual sightings, a break-in, threats." His gaze locked on Mr. Hale. "Your name keeps coming up." Mr. Hale exhaled sharply, his control slipping. Not much left to hide behind. "I didn't harm anyone," he muttered. "No one said you did," the inspector replied. "But you trespassed. You threatened. You followed people. You left warnings." Mr. Hale looked at Miss Marple, a bitter half-smile. "You really put it all together." Miss Marple didn't answer. She didn't need to. Inspector Hale stepped closer. "Start talking." Mr. Hale rubbed his forehead. Tired. Defeated. "Done hiding." "I panicked," he said. Voice low. Anger gone. Only fear left. The boy returning. The old photograph. The ledger. He shook his head slowly. It meant trouble. Questions. Rumors. And the scandal would reach me, my business, my position. Inspector Hale stayed silent. Let him confess. Let the truth unravel. Mr. Hale continued. "I paid Evelyn to leave the village. I paid for her. Silence. I paid to erase the past." Mrs. Fenton closed her eyes. Pain deep, old, still sharp. "But when he came back," Mr. Hale said, nodding toward the young man, "I knew the story would surface. A hidden son, an affair, a ruined reputation." "So you threatened Miss Marple?" the inspector asked. "Yes," Mr. Hale said quietly. "I delivered the note. I followed her. I put the flower in her cottage. I just wanted her to stop digging." He swallowed. Visible shame. "I didn't want violence. I only wanted silence." Inspector Hale nodded once. "Breaking and entering is still a crime. Harassment is a crime. Intimidation is a crime." Mr. Hale didn't resist, didn't deny, didn't argue. He simply extended his wrists, accepted the consequences. Inspector Hale pulled out the cuffs, clicked them shut. Firm, certain. Mrs. Fenton sobbed quietly. The young man stood frozen. Miss Marple stepped back, hands folded, calm. Inspector Hale guided the man toward the door. "We can finish this at the station." Mr. Hale paused in the doorway, looked back once, at the young man, at Mrs. Fenton, at the woman he tried to intimidate. "I just didn't want it all to fall apart," he said softly. Then he stepped outside, gone into the night. The cottage grew quiet again, calmer, safer, settled. Inspector Hale nodded to Miss Marple. "A clean case. You've done half the work for us. As usual." Miss Marple smiled politely. Slight, thoughtful. Case closed. Threat ended. Truth exposed. But as the inspector left, as the door shut, as silence returned, Miss Marple felt a weight remain. Something unspoken. Something unfinished. Something deeper than scandal. A truth still waiting. A truth untouched. A truth not yet said aloud. But one truth still remained. The village settled quickly once the arrest was made. People whispered for a day, then returned to their routines. Shops opened, windows steamed with morning tea. The lane felt normal again. Mrs. Fenton stayed inside for a while, not hiding, just breathing. The young man visited her quietly. No drama, no accusations. Just two people learning how to speak after years of silence. Miss Marple watched from her gate, not intruding, not rushing them. She understood the weight of hidden shame. She understood the fear that keeps people silent. And she understood the courage required to face old wounds. One afternoon she saw Mrs. Fenton and the young man walking together. Slow steps. Careful conversation. A beginning. A second chance. Miss Marple returned to her cottage with a small nod. Not victory, simply acceptance. Some secrets break people, others bind them. And some sit quietly for decades, waiting for the right moment to surface. She prepared her tea, sat by her window, reflected on the quiet tragedies that shape small lives. Not loud, not violent, just human. Sometimes the quietest secrets hurt the most. Edward returns softly. "Thank you for joining me tonight," he says, warm as ever. He pauses, then asks, "Which clue caught your attention first? And where are you listening from tonight?" He lets the room breathe, invites the comments, invites the community. Then his voice lowers, gentle but curious. Tomorrow's mystery begins with a missing letter and a door left slightly open. A final warm breath, a closing promise. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil.